Welcome into the Landon Tengwall Show, sponsored by the Student Bookstore, Downtown State College. Goon and I will be there Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Make sure you guys stop by. Today, I'm joined by Tyler Donohue, Lions 24/7. Tyler?
Hey, Landon. Always a pleasure. My first time in your studio with the microphones on. We had a car ride last time, so settle in, and I think we got a lot to discuss.
Yeah. This is a good one. You guys have been absolutely killing it, Lions 24/7. Best coverage out there, so I really want to commend you guys. You guys are doing a great job. And speaking of that, some quotes that you guys have been getting recently, the topics of the Penn State wide receivers, which is interesting after we give up 42 to UCLA, that very quickly the offense actually has become, I feel like, maybe even the bigger conversation right now, which I mean is fair after kind of how Oregon went in. And I think as much as how much did we score versus UCLA offense? 35?
Offensively, 28.
9
points from special teams.
Right, not exactly. So and versus a defense like that at UCLA, I think it's the question is correct to ask, especially when Drew Aller was kind of doing it all himself. What was the stat you gave about Drew Aller rushing?
Yeah, I mentioned this to Drew yesterday on a call, and he laughed about it because it's pretty crazy. 3 rushes in the last 2 games of 20-plus yards. His first 32 career starts, 3 rushes of 20-plus yards.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And I'll just say, like, watching he had to do that because, like, there was nothing else for him to do. Like, he had to go that route of running. So the biggest topic, like I said, has been the wide receivers and why we're not seeing some of those younger guys get reps. Tyler also gave the stat. In the past 4 games, Kobe Howard and Tyseer Denmark have had 6 snaps?
6 collective snaps between those 2 players. That includes the Florida International game. That includes the Villanova game. The combined scores of those were 86-6. And obviously that's the first 2 Big Ten games of the schedule as well. And, you know, they've got the 3 guys that they're rolling with that transfer. They're giving Liam Clifford at this point maybe 5 to 10 snaps per game. And that's kind of a shut door after that in the receiver conversation.
I think that's hard because, you know, it's one thing if the wide receivers are producing heavily, and then you can't really ask those questions. But the wide receivers are clearly struggling, not only against Oregon, but then you struggle against UCLA too. And it's like, oh boy. Like, I got Oregon's fans being like, oh, our wide receivers, you know, our DBs still haven't had a test yet. Like, that feels disrespectful to me now that you played a top 10 team and you're like, our DBs still haven't even been tested. And so, you know, I look at that, I'm like, we got to be able to get these guys at least the amount of reps that, like, Liam Clifford's getting. Like, I'm not asking to give Kobe Howard or Tyseer Denmark 25 reps. Like, can we get them 5 to 8 reps, though? I think that's a reasonable question. So Franklin was asked after practice about kind of the lack of reps that we've been talking about for Tyseer Denmark and Kobe Howard. And so you guys over at Lions 24/7, like I said, you guys have been killing it. Make sure you guys check them out. You asked them about that. What was the question exactly that you posed to him?
Yeah, so I closed out the media scrum on Wednesday evening, and this was honestly, I don't have a bone to pick with using Trevor Pena and Devontae Ross and Kyron Hudson. They've all in their own way showed the value that they bring to this team. But what I asked there was, is it difficult to get a full evaluation of a redshirt freshman in Tyseer Denmark and a true freshman in Kobe Howard without a sample size in live game action? You got to go back to Nevada the last time they got any kind of decent run. And so James Franklin, I thought the scrum was going really well. I thought he had a lot of good energy up from last week, but he did not like this question of mine. I think that was pretty easy to tell from his body language and probably the answer. But I thought it needed to be asked, and we're in the business of asking questions that need to be asked, especially in a moment like this.
Amen. Yeah, so I have it right here. His response was, obviously we're in a position right now where we don't have plays and drives to just throw somebody out there and see how it goes. We've got to get our best guys on the field. Every rep is like gold. Every drive is like gold. We've got to maximize that. And if we feel like guys give us a better chance based on what we've seen in practice, then yeah, we would do that. So then you guys get to talk to a couple of Penn State DBs. Daniel Gallen was talking to Davian Collins, starting cornerback, about the young wide receivers. Is there anybody standing out? And he responded, Kobe Howard. He's going to be a great guy here. King Mack, who's basically the starting safety across from Zaki at this point, was asked about specifically Tyseer Denmark and Kobe Howard. And he said, talented. And when I say talented, I mean very, very talented. He said they perform every day. That doesn't sound like there's questions about how Kobe Howard and gang is performing at practice. And I'll have people, I've already had people on Twitter say it. They say, oh, well, of course they're going to say that. They're teammates. I've been that guy. I've had Tyler ask me about a defensive lineman where I know he's not doing well. He's a young guy. And I'll say something like, yeah, like, he's coming along really well. He's working hard. He's, coming in every day. You don't say, talented. And when I say talented, very, very talented, you're not going to just do that. And I've seen how Kobe Howard, I've been to some practice. I've seen things. Kobe Howard is balling out. So I have these, like the answer of very, very, like that's how people talk about Chaz Coleman, like in summer camp. Like that was the vibe I'm getting of Kobe Howard, but he's not seeing any snaps. Like I know you kind of given your thoughts, but like, why are we not seeing these guys get at least 5 to 8 snaps?
We had a preseason progress report series over at Lions 24/7. Had some conversations where we didn't, necessarily name who was giving us the quotes, but it was an effective way to get a clear picture of some things. There were 3 freshmen who we spotlighted. One was Chaz Coleman early in camp. The other was Darius Dixon, who's obviously burned his red shirt too at cornerback. The third was Kobe Howard, and it was coming in polished, a guy who clearly was ready out of Chaminade Madonna, high-level football down in South Florida, ready for the moment, competitive streak, the kind of competitive streak that maybe the room had lacked a little bit in recent seasons. And then even on the record, Marcus Hagans was like, this is the guy where you roll out the football on a cement slab and he'll figure out a way to go win the game. Like he just wants the football, he wants to compete. And I think what also stood out from those conversations, Landon, was like not just that he's smooth and he's agile and he's quick and he's making life difficult for some primary defensive backs. It was that he's in his playbook. He's accountable. And so that was the story in August. Obviously, we're not getting necessarily the same feedback in season. I haven't gotten much feedback in season on a lot of freshmen. They have a lot of things to talk about, but I felt like it was worth readdressing at this point. And at the end of the day, I think the really conversation, I want to kind of bring those spotlight away from those 3 primary receivers a little bit, because to me, it's more about kind of the failure to maximize those 3 non-conference games. You and I talked on our little journey in the car back in August, and it was like getting to 3-0 is the goal. It should be 3 blowouts, but you also need to have a bit of a chance to learn about your roster, explore your roster, figure out who's ready for prime time. Did they figure that out by getting Kobe Howard and Tyseer Denmark involved for 1 or 2 snaps against FIU and Villanova? They won those games 86-6. I think you can probably say the same thing about the linebacker position, the running back position, but receiver being what it has been here lately in the Franklin era with Marcus Hagans and even before Marcus Hagans, it's a hot button issue. And again, I think the conversation for me really comes down to, James, isn't this an offense that could afford another playmaker or 2? I don't think this is an offense that should be shutting out playmakers because they're not quite getting it done on the practice field. And look, I know that's the coach's job to evaluate over the course of the week, determine who plays, but you'd like to have, even not in the bright lights, not against Oregon for Kobe Howard, but how about 10 to 20 snaps against Villanova, a game you won 52-6? And I think whatever that distrust has been, it's hard to kind of flip that switch now that you're in Big Ten play. The team's tight. As he said, every rep is gold, every series is gold. And, it's probably just below the Katron Allen conversation for me is the lack of second and third level development on the depth chart at receiver, at running back, and at linebacker, which was a glaring issue at UCLA. These will cost you a game. I think they have cost them a game, and I think they could continue to cost them down the road if they don't figure out what they have beyond the starting lineup. And then for other reasons, modern college football, you're incentivized here at Penn State to come and earn that big NIL deal. This is not a program that is saying, hey, you're a great high school football player. Here's a fat check, $2 million just for showing up on campus and giving us a chance to coach you. It's more like, hey, you'll get paid fine. You'll be okay for an 18-year-old. But if you get to the point by the end of your first year and you're clearly a contributor and you're trending in that direction, we will be proactive in making sure you get paid. We'll come to you with money before you have to come knocking on our door for the money. That's been the read I've gotten over the last couple of years. And when you're a second stringer, a freshman, a redshirt freshman, and you're not feeling like game action is available to you, that is your platform to earn a pay raise. And that's what college football is. You can pursue pay raises as a player now out in the open. And if you don't have that platform of game reps, you're not going to get that pay raise on the practice field.
Yeah, you got some great points there. And so I think that is the interesting point. Is there a little bit more, and I compare this to the NFL, in terms of how a first-round draft pick gets so many more chances than a 5th-round draft pick because of the capital you spent. That was a very important thing that is valuable to that team. So you spent a 1st-round draft pick. We need this guy to do well because, the GM or, the owners and the fans, like, if we keep missing on these 1st-round draft picks, there's an issue. If you go out and if you're Penn State and you say, hey, we need to go out, and you go to the donors, and obviously there's a cap now where you have like $16 million to spend, but you go out to the donors and say, hey, we got a squad this year. We need to just get some wide receivers and we're good. So can you give us a budget? Like I said, I don't know the number, but let's just say $2.5 million for us to go out and get 3 great wide receivers. are you a little bit more reluctant? And, the donors say, absolutely, let's do it. I see how close we were. Let's go do it. Go do whatever you need. Are you then reluctant, if you are the coaching staff, to then say, well, we're not gonna take time away from these guys, or we're not even gonna think. And no one's saying that any wide receiver should be like benched for Kobe Howard or Tyser Denmark, but are you reluctant to start to mix these guys in? And if they start to perform, it's like, shoot, like maybe you do have to think about this guy taking over one of the starting wide receivers if he performs. And then that whatever $750 million that you got from that donor to go pay that wide receiver that you got is basically poof. You're not using that money, that person anymore. And it's not that much about this year. It's like, shoot, we're not going to be able to go back next year. And when we have whatever defensive line that we need to fill and they're going to say, well, what about last year when you told us about the wide receivers and my money went to waste? But I think that's everywhere. That's college football. That's a new conundrum that coaches across college football landscape are having to deal with, is that first round draft pick mindset of like, we pay a guy a lot of money. He needs to work because we're putting an investment in, and generally you have some booster that's backing it that you do not want to piss off because you want to go back to that booster for money for the next guy. And if you bench his money basically that he put in, well, that booster is going to be kind of pissed off. So I asked that question of, is that a reason? And then I do want to say, I think you made a great point, and this was like a heavy talking point for me when I was defending Penn State's schedule to start the year and saying, guys, this is a team that's very top heavy, meaning like all the starters, we thought, were in a very, very good place, but the depth was lacking. And it was like, hey, this is why this schedule is perfect. We're going to get 3 games where we could borderline have 6 quarters of football for the backups. And it wasn't even close for that. The linebackers didn't get the reps they needed. The wide receivers didn't. The run, RB3, all that type of stuff. And so, I mean,
I think you had Nick Singleton in the fourth quarter of a 52-6 game against Villanova at the goal line, right? Isn't that who they? And I know James said it wasn't a get-right thing for Nick that day, but he had 20 touches through the first 3 quarters compared to 6 for Katron. He didn't have any RB3 usage. Sounds like the RB3 competition, some of the public things Stan Drayton has said, has been kind of underwhelming with some of those guys. No one has stepped up. But at the same time, I've seen it in person with this Penn State team. I've seen it working with another college football program. Certain guys, when they get that first taste of game action, they get that first confidence-inducing play on the field, they become a different person. They grow up in a hurry. That maturation process accelerates. And there's only so much you can accomplish on the practice field, it feels like sometimes. And especially based on what we've heard about a guy like Kobe Howard, if you still feel like you're hitting your head on the ceiling and not getting on the field, that can go the opposite direction, where instead of being halfway through your freshman year and all of a sudden your confidence is on the rise because you've done some things in a game, you can point to some film that you've developed. Instead, you're kind of wondering, am I going to see the field? Am I going to play this Saturday? I hate watching football. I've always been a key player on my team. Am I still good? Do I belong at this level? Do I need to leave here? I thought I was going to make friends here. I thought it was going to be my future here. And then you start questioning things. And I know that's a lot of big picture stuff, but that's a reality. And to your point, you know this far better than me. I was never in a position to make 6 or 7 figures playing football like you. But it used to be that all 85 roster spots were truly created equal. It was literally like, forget your 5-star status. I don't think it's forgotten anymore. I think it's, you look at the salary, whatever you want to call it, and it doesn't feel like there's that state of complete equilibrium on your roster, which is great for player empowerment, but I do wonder how that impacts every roster across America. And I think right now it's fair to wonder how it may be impacting a personnel plan, which is crazy to think about because this team cannot jeopardize their personnel plan right now. They had very little room for error last week. I mean, it's gone now. They can't lose to Ohio State. They can't lose to anybody. And so you have to be very careful about external circumstances that don't actually involve the X's and O's and the pursuit of wins, and are more about managing the egos in your locker room or whatever you want to describe that as. It is a scary balance for a lot of coaches, and I felt like Franklin had a really good kind of feel for that. But I think it's fair for people to wonder where that is right now, and that's just that's what happens when you win. The warts don't show up as often. And when you lose, people start to pry, they dig. There's a little more leaks coming out of the building maybe because there's some unsatisfied people. And all of a sudden, you have a different kind of storyline developing.
Yeah, this is something I just popped in my head while you're talking is like, think about the roster as a whole and who we thought, was going to be drafted after this year and all that. Is there a single person on this roster that has improved their draft stock in any way? Is there anybody that's even stayed the same? I mean, I think the one...
Katron Allen.
Well, yeah, I think that's the one person you can point to, but he's not getting the reps, the carries to even like... And I think teams can kind of see through certain things, teams being, meaning GMs of NFL, rosters, but like Katron would be I think the singular and only answer. I mean, like, I'll give like Zakee Wheatley's played well, but like when teams are like go down like this, it hurts everybody. Like there's been a lot of draft stocks that are going down because of the way Penn State's playing. And that's another reason I worry about the locker room, because you start to see the ability to make money to start to kind of dwindle, and that can make everybody go a little bit crazy.
Well, so you're talking about the starters seeing money dwindle long-term in the NFL, and I'm talking about the backups seeing their financial ceiling at the college level dwindle. And it's a shame that we got to throw a bunch of cash on the table here during our conversation, regardless of football. But folks, this is the world we live in, and it does feel like a little quasi-pro football coverage right now. I don't think we're all the way there, but we are inching closer.
Yeah, we started to talk about it, so let's talk about the Penn State rushing attack. I wanted to give this stat. I haven't really put this out there. Penn State's true rushing yards against UCLA. So I'm excluding Drew Aller's scramble yards, which are passing plays that he took off. So I think that's fair. This just encapsulates how good is the true rushing attack when you actually run the ball. 20 rushes for 79 yards against UCLA. And I know it wasn't that many. I mean, 20 rushes isn't a ton, but that's a team that was allowing 232 yards rushing per game against New Mexico. I mean, some not so good teams. You got to get back on track against Northwestern this weekend. What's your take on the running back room and the splits of the carries with Katron Allen and Nick Singleton specifically?
Yeah, first off, going into the game last week, only 5 teams in FBS had a worse rush defense than UCLA. So, yeah, it's a hard thing to stomach, and ultimately I think that it's very difficult to see this team and hear this team talk about Katron Allen as a tone setter who resonates energy when he runs the football with authority. He's playing the best football of his career. He's averaging 7 yards per carry. And I say this, I got to say this first about Nick Singleton. He has tremendous moments. He's got some hardware in his trophy case that he'll have forever. He's going to potentially be, above Saquon Barkley in some pretty impressive career categories. But this is not a lifetime achievement conversation right now. This is we need to win the next game or we're going to be out of the college football playoff conversation. Yep. And there is no room for error. And I'm curious what it looks like when the staff was willing to go so heavy on Nick Singleton against Villanova. And I asked James Franklin after that game, was the purpose to get him on track mentally? Because a few days earlier, James thought he was overthinking some things. James kind of brushed that away, that notion that I brought up, and said it was just more about the flow of the game, who was on the field for which possessions, and the way those possessions turned out. But at the end of the day, it was 20 carries for Nick and 6 for Katron. And by the end of that was through 3 quarters. By the end of the game, Katron has more rushing yards than him. And so I think you get to this point and you say, a lot of respect for Nick Singleton. He's still going to be a valued member of this team. He's got room in this offensive plan, but you need to see what Katron Allen looks like as a featured player. You owe that to Katron. You owe that to your offensive line. You owe that to your entire offense. You owe it to everybody, because the way Nick Singleton's running right now, we're kind of failing to run a little bit. And I know that the offensive line, as you've discussed, has not been anywhere near where we thought they would be this season, but Katron's still finding a way to get 7 yards pop. And on the road to UCLA, he was pretty close to that total with 8 carries. He had 2 touchdowns, but more than that.
Sorry, I want you to finish your point, but he would have been at 7 yards. He would have been at 7 yards per carry, but 2 of his 8 rushes were touchdowns. Yes. So he's capped. He can't get any more yards on those carries. Yeah. So I think he would have been at 7. I'm sorry. Continue. I just can't.
It's okay, Landon. even though we saw Nick involved there, it wasn't the last play. 4th and 2, I know, was the glaring one. The series before, though, where Penn State brings it within a 7-point game, I think 75 yards on the ground during that path. 4 straight carries, I believe, to Singleton, including that 4th and short. And he didn't do much with the first 3. I think 3 carries resulted in a 4th and 1 situation. I was amazed they went back to him in that spot, because you don't get it there. You're down by 2 scores and the game's over. And to his credit, he picked up enough yards to get it. But I believe in the last 3 games now, about 40% of Nick's carries are going for 2 yards or less. And one of the things that James has really beat the drum on is we need better down and distance. They have not just come out of the gate with the first down handoff to Katron Allen very often. I'm parsing through some stats of his and Nick's for a story I'm going to have up at Lions 24/7 later here on Thursday, but it's not pretty math in terms of the comparison right now. And I asked James on Monday at the press conference, I felt it was important to distinguish it. Who is responsible for delegating which running backs in at the certain time? And what was the conversation like before the UCLA game? Because James told us prior to my question that they had conversations after the game about we need to get Katron more involved. It's apparent that we need to do that. Well, what was the sentiment before? He said, It was to get Katron more involved going into the UCLA game. And he said it's a Stan Drayton, Andy Kotelnicki kind of collaboration decision. I don't know who's tapping these guys on the shoulder. It's not Andy because he's up in the booth, but who's actually saying, Nick, you're in now, Katron, you're in now, and making that determination. But Katron Allen has looked like their most consistent, effective, positive football player on the offensive side of the ball for all 5 games this year. And all due respect to Tyler Warren, I think he made the argument that he was that guy during the postseason last year, which is saying something because Nick was playing at a high level too. But it's now, a 10-game sample size over 2 different seasons. And I know I've been saying on my podcast even, Nick's always one play away from turning this around. 160-yard run. We're now through 300 minutes of football. You're almost at the midseason. You are 3-2. His longest run of the season is 16 yards. I think people need to understand this is not a pile on Nick Singleton situation. Yeah. This is a what can you maximize with Katron Allen, who has 7 games, maybe. That's about, we don't know what beyond that, but he's got 7 games left in his Penn State career guaranteed. And both these guys are out the door. You know nothing about your running back situation beyond them. You need to invest in this guy, and it has to happen now. And if we get to the halftime against Northwestern and the offense looks a little clunky, and we're seeing Singleton with 8 carries and Katron with 6 carries, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I think you make a great point. I covered it profusely on this channel, but I was shocked after Franklin admitted that before the game they talked about needing to get Katron carries, and they just didn't. And like I said this, and I was just confused. There was no. I would have called it an excuse, honestly, but there wasn't even an excuse given as to why it didn't happen. It was just, it didn't happen. And so I think that's hard for a lot of people to stomach right now. And I think that's why it makes, and I hate to come back to it already, but I think that's why it makes the whole wide receiver situation hard to handle. And there's actually more questions.
There's a disconnect between the train of thought in one area versus the train of thought in the other area. Doesn't seem consistent.
Right. And that, and I think the one thing that does seem consistent is like stubbornness to like make a change when it's a clear, glaring problem like Nick and Katron. So, it's kind of easier if you were a coach to say, talk about what you have or haven't seen in practice because no one else sees that. But, we see how you're handling the Nick and Katron situation. Is that the same thing with the wide receivers right now? Because I'll tell you from the game reps that I've seen, the wide receivers ain't getting open. There is no separation. And I've said, I feel for Drew Aller. He was trying to play Superman football on Saturday against UCLA. With 11 rushes.
I told you before we recorded, I felt much worse about Penn State coming out of the UCLA game than I did coming out of the Oregon game. But I felt better about Drew Aller coming out of the UCLA game. And so that's a silver lining there. But you're right. It's a process where, I'll just go back to what James said, that every touch is golden, every drive is golden, every play is golden. And you're giving them to somebody in Nick who right now is not necessarily producing with those opportunities. And you're giving them possessions. It's not just a play. it feels like it's possession by possession who's out there a lot and whatever that's dictated by. And ultimately, you're right. It feels like maybe they set out a blueprint. They laid it on the table, the last week of August and said, here's how we're going to do it every single game. And there hasn't maybe been, now that you've been punched in the stomach and maybe kicked somewhere else through 5 games, there hasn't been the necessary reactive changes that you'd anticipate from some different spots in the field.
Yeah, you're tempting me to go through and just look at like every 1st and 10.
Oh, okay. No, whatever you're gonna say, do it.
You're like, dude, you're tempting me that. After this, I'm gonna spend the rest of my afternoon going through looking at 1st and 10s and like, how many times did Katron Allen get the ball? Are you doing?
I'm in the process.
Okay, I won't do it then. Go check out Lions 24/7 and let me know when that's up because I want to see that because like you said, like. James has said that's the biggest issue is the reason why we have a bad 3rd down percentage and we're averaging, I think, close to 3rd and 7, 3rd and 6 on 3rd downs this year is the average yardage to gain is because we're not good in 1st and 2nd down. Well, what's the 1st and 2nd down play calling? It sounds like Tyler's going to have that. So I get my afternoon back. I'm excited to see what he comes up with. I think there's a lot of questions there. And as we said, there still is fault, obviously, on the offensive line. Tight ends had a really bad day blocking against UCLA. Dinkins and Reynolds, to be honest. I think Rapplier kind of deserves a little bit more of a look here.
Let me ask you this, Landon. Obviously, there's a lot of individual shortcomings that we're pointing to, but is this more systemic of a cohesive shortcoming, a cohesive failure that ultimately when you watch the film, it looks like this guy's not doing his job, this guy's not doing his job. I know Drew Shelton, when we talked to him this week, was like, it feels like on offense we have 4 guys doing their job, 1 guy doesn't. And not just it's the same guy every time, but play by play, 4 guys are doing it right, 1 guy's not. Does it feel like for a team that brought back its offensive coordinator, brought back so many starters, where did it go wrong almost? Does it feel like to you a little bit and versus the individual spotlighting where collectively this program or the approach is letting down each of those players.
Yeah, it feels like there's a lack of intensity, and I've said this, like no one's having fun.
Rapelier, who is probably the most candid conversationalist or up there in the locker room right now. I spoke to him yesterday, and he said it was not where they didn't have the energy. They were all week going out to UCLA like, yeah, we need to rebound, we need to get a win. He said when took the field, you could sense it, that they didn't have the juice that was required. I get the sense from talking to Rapelier this week and some other people around the program that that's not going to be an issue against Northwestern, although I question how they will react psychologically at the vitriol that is going to wait for them in Beaver Stadium and a hostile environment in your own home stadium. And so they got another test here, but psychologically, I think I have concerns.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was the touchdown that we scored to bring it within 6, I believe, and then Nico went down and they scored one more time, and then they got the 2-pointer. The touchdown.
We are really letting the defense off the hook on this conversation.
Yeah, we are. Defense has not been talked about enough, but I mean, I feel like they were talked about it ad nauseum the first 48 hours of the no spy and just all that stuff. We'll talk about them in a second. Drew Aller had that rush on 3rd down where it was like a 24, it was like down to the 2-yard line. And he got up and he was like, ah! And I looked back at it on film and it was like he was trying to inject a little bit of life into the offense and like no one like grabbed it and ran. Like that's what it feels like. And we're just missing that. And then, there's a lack of attention to detail. It feels like there's times where it just looks like the offensive line isn't confident to know like where are we going on this combo block. Khalil Dinkins like back-to-back plays, we're running outside zone, and he whiffed on back-to-back blocks against a defensive end that he's just, I think it was even an outside linebacker, that he's just better than. Khalil Dinkins.
We talked about him being maybe the best blocking tight end in the Big Ten coming in.
That's what I would have said almost in college football. Like, I would have put him up against anybody. And he's like, he was rolling some dudes early on, but like, struggling right now. And then, you go to that 4th down play, the final, the jet motion to Pena where Drew kept it. And so like Reynolds misses his block there. I guess I struggle with like the one thing that's going for you is at least putting the ball in Drew Aller's hands. And I know he had the ball in his hands because he obviously kept it, but like I feel like there's a lack of confidence from the play calling to like there's just, I don't know, like it's not all the way there. That I feel like the lack of confidence is felt all around, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I think, and it's almost like what came first, chicken or the egg? Like, are the plays being called this way because Kotoniki feels a lack of confidence in like X? Is it because the players are showing certain things? I mean, I think it's honestly, it's all compounding. Like, it's not just one answer.
Well, there was a lack of confidence that you could feel September 7th against Florida International. It was 10-0 at halftime. You could feel it a little bit in the Villanova game. Certainly when you score 3 points through 50 minutes or so of football against Oregon, you could sense that. But again, I think individually, this isn't like Space Jam where the aliens come down and zap your talent out of you. These are still really good, talented players. Confidence may be an issue, but I think you have to consider where the coaching is, because James Franklin didn't only tell us several times over the course of August and even before that this was the best roster he's ever assembled, the most talented roster. He said it was the most talented, the smartest staff he has built. And we know that he's been given, a lot of opportunities to go out and make some splashy hires and guys that aren't just in position coach jobs and coordinator jobs, but analysts, a big army of them. And so something has fallen far short of expectations in that regard too. Before we talk about these individuals falling short, that this is, again, I think something that's systemic right now. And I wonder if they can reverse course, do a 180, charge down to the rest of the Big Ten schedule. I think that's a big question mark. But I think about Drew, you're right. It was late in the Oregon game, much of the UCLA game, he was finally the thermostat. He was finally setting the temperature for his team, finally setting the temperature for his offense, where a few games there, much of the Oregon game, he was reacting to the temperature around him. And I hate to see that from a quarterback who started 30 games as a senior. And I know Drew has it in him to have those fiery moments. You've talked about Sean Clifford. I covered Sean. He can be tough to cover sometimes because he's so damn fiery. But I had a ton of respect for him because win or lose, he was all on the line and he was making sure his teammates were going to do the same. And I think that leading by example has showed up for Drew maybe over the course of the last 5 quarters. That needs to sustain. They need him to be that guy moving forward. He's got to be. And we talked to him on Wednesday. I picked up a lot of positive vibes from him. If he can be that guy, I think they got a chance to turn some things around offensively. But at the end of the day, you also got to deal with Andy Kotelnicki and this staff, putting them in the best position to succeed.
Yeah, no, I think it's right to ask a lot of questions all around. And like I said, I feel for Drew. I think he's trying extremely hard. I I need him to be the guy that's lighting the fire under dudes' butts. Let's put it that way. Like you need that from your quarterback. They win, like you said, win or lose, no matter how you felt about Sean Clifford. That dude was going to give it everything, and his emotion was always going to be shown. And it's very evident, obviously, like Drew just does not lead the same way.
Trace, too. We got to say Trace, of course. Same deal with Trace.
Absolutely. You just see the fire. And like I said, Drew just needs to continue to bring that out because I think that will bring the best of him out if he can do that for his team, and the offense is going to feed off that. Because it's clear, even though Tyler Warren was not vocal at all, like people just saw that and were like, hell yeah. Like I just watched that guy bury someone in the sideline and then moss a DB in the end zone. Yeah. I love that guy. I'm going to go to battle for him. You're missing that right now. And like the one guy that's bringing it is on the sideline.
Patron, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I saw him give the quote about how he's in the last building from 6 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. and how he doesn't go anywhere else.
Yeah.
He's only, if he goes anywhere, it's just the Mac next door to do some studying with his one class. I feel like he needs to take some of that time.
Do you think Matt Leinart had ballroom dancing as his last year at USC? Do you think he was just sticking around the facility, or do you think he was maybe fraternizing a bit more with the community? I don't want to tell a guy what to do, but we had some people on our board literally just be like, he needs to go have a beer with someone downtown, some students downtown. You hate to miss out on your college life, and it is such a professional thing. He's getting paid so well. There's probably so far less that he has in common with his fellow student now than what a guy like Kerry Collins would have, or Trace McSorley, or even Sean Clifford, because they were living a more identifiable experience. This guy's showing up in advertising campaigns, nationally. It's a different reality. But yeah, I don't know if that's the healthiest thing to do.
It's definitely not. It's definitely not. And I understand the want to like work hard. There's only so much like studying and film you can do on one team. So I wanted to bring that up, and not, like I said, like it's clear that this is an example of like him trying too hard almost. I think that's a perfect example.
But why is he? Who is telling him? He's got his personal quarterback trainer, Brad Mendler. I spoke with him a bunch. He's kind of been in this, high focus quarterback development process for 6-7 years now. You added Mike Yurcich to that with his feedback, which that wasn't all that productive for him ultimately. The way he approached, he sucked to deal with in the media. I'll put that out on every platform. I'm sure he wasn't fun to work with in the quarterback room either. And then now you have Andy Kotelnicki, very different personality, and James Franklin. We know he is in a bunch with the quarterback meeting rooms. So I don't know if this is paralysis by analysis sometimes with Drew.
I think something interesting to talk about too. I mean, it can't be easy. The fact that Drew essentially has 4 or 5 guys in his ear between Franklin, Kotelnicki, Trace, Danny. There's even Urban, I believe, is kind of around that. So like they're the assistant coach. Like,
and I think Brad's always involved in one way or another.
You're hearing from Brad.
He's not in the building, but he's going to be involved.
Yeah, you're going to talk to. I talk to my offensive line trainer from home all the time. So you're hearing from Brad. So there's 5-6 voices that you're hearing. That's hard. And I've talked about this. Shout out to Mike Portman for he talked to a sports psychologist, and the sports psychologist said, like, I'm not going to talk about one player, but it was all about Drew. And this is in general. We were having the NIL conversation too. That what you internally value about, intrinsically is what it's, what you intrinsically value about football is like when you're 8 and you just love football and you love the game and it's all about playing, and that joy you get when you smell the grass and you put on the helmet and think about the first time that you went out there and you got hit and you fell in love with it or you scored your first touchdown. That's your intrinsic.
I'm getting chills.
I am too. Look, like hair standing back.
Up. I mean, I didn't go that. I didn't stop. I could play after I was 18, but I remember what it was like when I was young, and you figured it out that you loved it. Yeah,
that's and then we go different. We're covering it now, but that's where you get the love. That's where most people get their love. And so now you're in a world where the extrinsic values are so great for these college football players: cars, fame, millions of dollars, campaigns with Travis Kelce, Venmo, all this different stuff. And there's so much outside noise, and now too that there's more pressure on me because I'm being paid. Like that's not lost on the players. It's great they're driving these fancy cars, they got millions of dollars in the bank account, so it's hard to feel bad for them. But like they know that there's more weight on their shoulders because they're being paid, and so naturally what happens is when you're getting those great extrinsic things, the intrinsic value just goes down. That's human nature. That it's hard. So I'm not saying that about Drew, but really everybody as a whole, like that could be partially some things to look at. Is like, do guys start to relax a little bit when they are getting paid a ton of money? Like I said, I'm not talking about Drew at all because clearly he's doing everything he can in the building.
Well, who else is doing the same tightrope walk, balancing act with these intrinsic and extrinsic things? Ohio State, Oregon. I mean, this is not a unique thing for Penn State right now.
Yeah.
This is not a unique thing.
No, you're completely right. And so, I just want to throw that out there as a whole. Like I said, that really wasn't Drew. I was just putting it out there for just guys in general. If you're looking around and saying, why are you even around college football? What's happening to certain guys? But yeah, back to Drew specifically, it just feels like that quote that I saw of like, I'm trying to do everything. I think he's trying to do like everything all at once. And I don't know. It almost feels like he doesn't have enough help or he doesn't fully understand how to attack it. And I think part of that is like, and we've seen it, it feels like the entire way he has been, don't make a mistake, don't mess up, don't do this. And it's like almost like some chains have been put on him and he's trying to break out of it, but he hasn't had to. And there hasn't been that like need for him to. And now it's like, Drew, we need you to like ball out. And it's like, shoot, okay, I'm going to do whatever I can do. I'm going to go into Lash 14 hours a day. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to run when I need to. And that's where I start to feel bad for the guy because it feels like I said, just doesn't have the help that he needs.
I do wonder, because after the Oregon game, I put together a comparative side by side with him and Sean Clifford. And if you recall in 2022, people were beating the drum to say, get 6-year senior Sean Clifford out of there and put the freshman in. He's the 5-star phenom. He's the future of the franchise. Get his ass in, right? That season finishes it with the Rose Bowl MVP for Sean Clifford. He had a fantastic year. Of course, they had a couple losses to Michigan and Ohio State, and that was what it was. But the comparison I did was just the statistical output. 6 games, I believe now, for Drew Aller in Beaver Stadium or on a neutral field against a top 10 opponent. He's under 150 passing yards per game. That is a remarkably low number in college football for a quarterback like this. You talk about Sean Clifford, he was right around 280, 290 yards per game in the same settings against top 10 opponents in Beaver Stadium. I mean, they lost to Ohio State every time Sean Clifford played against them, but damn, he threw his punches, right? I mean, he was going 370 on the road or something like that in Columbus. Even the game where he ended up getting 3-4 turnovers and getting a bunch of heat in Beaver Stadium, he still put up numbers. He was balling out to Parker Washington. He was giving them a chance down the field. And so, yeah, I wonder if maybe late in his career, the leash feels a little bit loosened on these moments. I don't know why. He's been coached to throw up for pass interferences versus letting it fly to get a touchdown. And he had 9 throws through the Oregon game of 20-plus yards in 4 games. The 3 completions were all touchdowns. And so you just wonder what it might have looked like if he kind of was able to, whether it's on him or whether it's those people who have kind of determined what he looks like in games and how he's going to perform in games, what it might have looked like if he was able to play a little looser. But to be honest, it just might not be his personality. It might not be who he is from a DNA standpoint, but it's hard to kind of parse through all that when Franklin's already canned one offensive coordinator coming off of one of those games against Michigan. And now you got Andy Kotelnicki, who was, the golden boy this offseason, really, in a lot of ways. People are talking about him differently coming off of a top 10 letdown against Oregon where they got hot late. They had a lead in overtime. But again, 3 points through about 50 minutes of football in your home stadium in that setting. It felt like, here we go again. And what's the other than James Franklin, what is the consistent there? Has been Drew Aller.
Yeah, I think you said it's hard to decipher because there's so many different things that are affecting this, so we can't point to one thing. And
Drew never throws. Drew is the most, I think, self-aware person about the things he say could be construed, whether it's a receiver, a running back, an offensive lineman, a positional unit, a coach. He is one of the most tactical talkers on the team in terms of really being sure that he's not throwing anyone under the bus. So it's hard to gauge where his mind's at on this subject.
Yeah, and like you said, I think when I said earlier that I feel like he's had these chains, these restraints put on him his entire career. I think you point to the coaching point that I remember hearing, and I never thought much about it when I was a player, but the coaching point that, hey, if you're throwing a deep ball, if you're not going to be perfect, leave it short. What's going to happen? What's going to happen if you tell someone
What if
that?
you say, if you're going to throw a deep ball, you're going to be perfect because you're freaking awesome. Go throw it.
I've said that. I've said you need someone to go up to this guy.
You're Drew Aller. You can make this throw. Go make it.
That's the type of confidence that you need to instill. This is kind of going very, and a lot of people probably don't even notice this, but remember this, but in the NFL preseason, Trey Lance was just a bust for the 49ers.
Yes.
And he goes to the Cowboys. He sucks. He comes to the Chargers and is the MVP of the preseason. And it was before every pregame, Jim Harbaugh, which, we can feel a bunch of different ways about him, but he would go up to him and he would pound his chest and he would tap his shoulders. Mm-hmm. And he's saying, you're that dude. He's saying things along that line. You're that guy. They can't stop you. That is so important.
J.J. McCarthy, Harbaugh dynamic?
Yes.
They basically just headbutt each other before games, getting hyped up.
Oh, it's so important to have the confidence, and that's why positive coaching is so important, to having that positive speak. Yeah. All right. We could talk about
I
this.
told you we could go for a long time on the show.
I mean, this is some of my favorite conversation I've ever had on my podcast. We'll can the offense for now. I think that was great. I think we got a lot to see against Northwestern.
Yeah.
Real quick, let's throw out the defense.
Yeah.
I think similarly to the wide receiver RB3 situation, like the linebackers are in a not so good spot. And Franklin had admitted, I forget exactly after which game, but he's like, yeah, look, like linebacker depth, like we need to figure that out. It's Tuesday night and Tony Rojas goes down.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh crap. Dom DeLuca has to play 78 snaps. I know he would have played more, but he got injured for a second, had to go off the field. Where are we at with Cam Smith putting him out there? Where are we at with Keon Wiley? Is there a confidence to be able to play one of these younger guys? Because it was a good dynamic when you had Amari Campbell and Tony Rojas, and Dom would come in and play 18 to 22 snaps. And it was like, yeah, this is a good linebacker rotation. And then Tony Rojas going down changes everything.
Yeah. Dom DeLuca is one of the best dudes I've dealt with as a reporter for Penn State. I know you think highly of him.
My roommate. Yeah, one of my best friends. Yeah.
If you still are friends after your roommates, that means he's a good dude.
Yeah.
But I think with Dom DeLuca, we saw, I think, what he is best at last year as kind of a supplemental piece who can step up when called upon. I think he started 4 or 5 games last year. But you're looking at maybe that 20 to 30, 35 snap range. Again, kind of a supplemental defensive piece. And you had to thrust him front and center against UCLA. Well, I don't know if you had to, but you felt like you needed to with Amari Campbell. And by the way, Tony Ross was playing outstanding football before he got hurt. It's really a shame. And you want to talk about a tone setter. He is that kind of guy too. He was developing into that fiery individual. And we know that him and Amari Campbell go back. It was a beautiful thing watching them play off each other. And that was a big loss. But it can't be the reason why Nico finds a career day and doubles his previous rushing total. So to me, Jim Knowles, we talked about it with him in August. We talked about it with him in the bye week, and he is a very candid man. He doesn't say much, but you listen to what he says, and he says we're still searching for depth. I don't feel comfortable with linebacker depth, and at that point, you've got Rojas involved. He was talking about Alex Tash during the bye week as a guy who really felt like he was stepping up against Villanova. I think we all had our heads turned a little bit by what Alex Tash did late against the Wildcats. Going his range and kind of his aggressiveness. But apparently he's not getting talked about much anymore. He's on a scout team jersey on the practice field yesterday, and now Cam Smith's the guy getting discussed. And going into the UCLA game, it certainly seemed like James Franklin was setting the stage for us, at least, to have expectations that Cam Smith was going to have a role in the defensive plan. If your only snap is because Dom DeLuca had a minor injury he had to get taken care of, you were not part of the defensive game plan. You were a plan B. And so we don't know. Someone on our board was like, the thought must have been that Cam Smith and his athleticism was going to be a better matchup against that kind of quarterback. And my response was, we'll never know, and neither will the Penn State staff. And so where James Franklin has to be with this right now is, again, like wide receiver, how do you know until you get these guys game reps? If you don't feel like they're flashy enough on the practice field to warrant 40 snaps, okay, but maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, get there, let them teeth sink into that a little bit. They have not used anybody in Big Ten play. I think Keon Wiley got 5 snaps last game. He's been a bit of a rundown specialist to pop in sometimes. But right now, a guy like Cam Smith, even Wiley, Anthony Specca is someone that I was really high on last year that kind of seemed to fade away a little bit in the conversation. Now he's back. He's been the primary backup Mike linebacker. But the problem is, like, the distrust is exhibited by the staff. It's not us in the media being like, these dudes can't play, so you can't trust them. It's the staff telling us this by not playing them themselves. They're the ones who make the decision. So when Anthony Specca gets less than 5 snaps along the last couple Big Ten games, and you're not playing Alex Tash, and Cam Smith's only in on an emergency basis, and Keon Wiley's getting 5 reps as a 4th-year guy, tells me you don't trust the situation as a staff, just like you don't trust the situation at wide receiver. And maybe there's other extenuating circumstances like you kind of alluded to at receiver. But right now, again, it's got to be we have to win the game in front of us, because the only thing, if we don't, it's a pit of despair. If you think this sucks now, if we lose to Northwestern at home, forget about it. It's going to suck. It's going to be a slippery slope for this team. And you look at the schedule ahead, it could get very dangerous in terms of where this could go. So to me, now is not the time to be kind of kicking the can down the road. You got to look at what you've got. You've got to test what you've got. And maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe one of these linebackers gets busted coverage. Oh, well, at least you figured out what it looks like in a game, because conversely, maybe they can get a big hit. Maybe they get into the backfield. And after that, they're, oh my gosh, they're looking at Dan Connor with different eyes. It's lit up for them. I've seen it before. I've spent 3 years in a personnel role in a college football program where kids came to campus and they were kids, and by the end of that first year, they were men because they got to play. You don't become a man on the practice field. I think you take your lumps on the practice field, but I think you really become that man at the college football level when you go and do it against somebody else, when your family sees it on TV, when your friends see it in the stadium, when you can walk back into the locker room and feel like you were a part of the fight. Is Kobe Howard, is Anthony Specca, is Alex Tash feeling like they're a part of the fight right now, or do they feel like they're just practice field fodder preparing the other guys?
Yeah, confidence is everything. I've said that. Confidence means everything on the field. It does not matter if the guy across from you is better. If you got more confidence, you're winning almost every single time. No, Tyler, this is great. I'm excited to see how the linebackers look against this Northwestern team. They're going to run the football a lot. They're going to go quick passes. So it's going to be kind of similar to what we saw already against UCLA. That makes a lot of people say, oh, no. Talk to me this weekend prediction. We haven't talked to any Northwestern. We'll throw out a little prediction. How do you see this going? The crowd, James Franklin seems like he's basically prepared for boos to a degree. I saw that you guys asked a couple of the different players of what they're expecting to hear. I think who was it that said he was like, yeah, I'm just going to be playing football.
Zach Key. Yeah. Which is what you expect from. I think Drew Shelton was a little bit more. Look, we hear the frustration. Obviously, we understand why it's out there, but at the end of the day, we got to control what we can control, and I think that's what it comes down to. The way past this is not by sidestepping the fire. It's walking through the fire and trying to get to the other side of it. And the way you do that is going out there and playing motivated football, having that juice in the game. We heard guys, Drew Aller said there's a lot of guys in this locker room playing for James Franklin right now and saying that he's going, they know what he's going through right now in terms of the heat. And so is that exhibited early? Because if it's not, this crowd will quickly go hostile. I mean, there's already a segment of the crowd who's going to show up and be ready and maybe only making the trip because they want to make their voice heard. But there are plenty of people who are here for homecoming, want to see old friends, want to enjoy the pageantry of a college football game. Not everybody is living and dying on the message boards. As much as I would love them to be subscribing to my site and watching everything, some people just show up for a good time, and football's part of the experience. And so those people will start to turn on the program if it goes bad. So to me, I've got them coming out, and I've got them giving the ball to Kaytron Allen. I think that's going to happen more. I think the way that James Franklin has publicly kind of talked about them needing to do that this week, he's put himself in a pretty hard place where if he doesn't deliver on that, how it would look on him and the staff. But we'll see. I do think that Drew Aller, I'm going to say that he found something in himself the last couple games. Maybe he's going to be able to kind of lift this team a little bit more than he has in the past. And so I've got them winning 34-14. I have trust issues with this defense, though, because we keep hearing that, the issue is the players are having a tough time because it's complex. When James Franklin's telling us that it's not as fast and as aggressive as the defense has been in years past, that's a huge red flag. We are 5 games in. It's not 1 game in or 2 games in and you're fine-tuning things in non-conference play. You went out and made this move for a win now, all-in mode, and you can't say our guys got to figure this thing out. And you give up 42 points to UCLA, averaging 14 points per game. That's about as ugly of a defensive performance I've seen from this program covering it. And so to me, Preston Stone's been through a lot of football. He's played for a few teams. He's no stranger to a pressure environment. He's their quarterback at Northwestern. They found a running back there now. They've got an offensive line that you and I were talking before. I think they've got at least a couple NFL guys. I think it's an above average to good offensive line in the Big Ten. And so to me, this is the kind of offense that will march 8, 9, 10 plays on you a few different times. And maybe they don't get touchdowns every time, but they can control the time of possession. And wasn't that such an issue against Oregon, against UCLA? And so that's my main concern is does this defense get off the field? I can't believe we're having these kind of conversations right now, mid-October, about this Northwestern matchup. But to me, it's got to be complimentary football. And it has eluded Penn State. Confidence football would be a big hit, and a win will maybe help them go into Iowa City. Because if you don't have confidence going into a night game at Kinnick, good luck.
Yeah. That's coming quick. That's coming fast. Yeah, I did not think this was going to be a worry game, but here we sit in October from 2 to unranked. You got to win this one. Yeah, I do think, as you said, I've actually known Preston Stone since freshman year of high school. So I've known him for a while. Like you said, bounced around. He was actually at Beaver Stadium last December with SMU.
Can I give you a quick note from our Daniel Gowan was out at Big Ten Media Days in Vegas back in July, and he talked to Preston Stone about that experience, and he summarized it by saying, it was really cold and we got our ass kicked. And I love that. I love that response from Preston Stone.
Yeah, it seems like that's kind of a baller response. Like, you just take it. Like, yeah, that's what happened. It was really cold that day. I think the one good news is for Penn State is, and Josh Pate said this, that the hard part for Penn State against UCLA and why those upsets rarely happen with those really bottom tier Big Ten teams is they didn't have the quarterback talent, a Nico type talent. I think Preston Stone's very good and has a good arm, but I don't think he's the game changer, especially obviously with his legs, that like Nico can be. Like if Nico didn't have his legs, I think Penn State wins that game, obviously. So I think that's kind of the saving grace. I hate that there's a saving grace as to why I think we're going to win against Northwestern, but that's where I sit right now. I think it'll be a slow start, especially. I don't know. Is it going to be rainy? I've heard it could be a little. I don't know.
I know we just had to cancel a bouncy house for a birthday party on Sunday because it's going to be too rainy. So
maybe not. We'll see. We'll get the weather forecast on Twitter. But Tyler, dude, I appreciate it. I seriously think this was one of my favorite conversations I've ever had on this channel. It was very candid. We just kind of put it all out there.
We've been doing this a long time, Landon.
Yeah. Oh, this is like podcast 30 for us. So we will definitely have more between Tyler and I for sure coming at you guys. But appreciate you guys tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe. Peace.